Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about the actual production numbers for the Acura CL 6-speed. Before we can talk about the production numbers, we need to review where the production numbers we all know today originated from. It's the clues in the wording and the content that will help us understand why we are able to invalidate the information. It's widely believed that the information contained in the December 2003 forum post by a user going by Ho Lake on Accurazine is the source of the production numbers we believe to be true today. And you can see that post here. The post in December by Ho Lake provides a breakdown of exterior colors, interior color, and navigation option. When you look at the totals provided in the post, you will find that Ho Lake claims that there are 3,479 Acura CL 6 speeds produced in the American market. But wait, how is that possible? Because the community has known the production number, or thought to be the production number, as 3,511. In this post, he claims that the data was pulled from Acura.com database, which we see right here. All attempts today to validate this claim have suggested that Acura.com never contained a database of production numbers, and while it is possible in 2003 Acura.com did contain production numbers, it doesn't align with the change in production numbers from 3,479 to the later believed 3,511. In the later December post by the user, let's go down to that. Right here, you can see the November 2004 post. You can see that he now claims that the total is 3,511. In the later post, he claims that his methods were running VIN numbers based on the VINs that he had, the VIN that he had on his car, and others found at dealerships, and is probably about 95% or more of the American market cars produced. So you can take a look at that right here. And so that's the information that we're comparing against. While we can produce additional information from the form that shows his methods for data collection are manual, it's not until a year later in a November 2004 post we see the user reappear claiming that information was completed and that the actual production is 3,511, or what we have calculated out to be 32 additional vehicles, or approximately 1%. This may not seem like a large gap, but when you're looking to verify your vehicle or you're looking to claim rarity, accuracy is of the utmost importance. A couple months later, user Ho Lake shares the VIN ranges. So here we are right here. Here's our VIN ranges. Production information, batch information he used to support his production number values. It's this information that allowed us to invalidate the production numbers because we were able to see the data set used, allowing us to compare against actual Honda data secured. You may ask at this point, if you have the actual Honda data, then why would you need to invalidate the information from a user on Accurazine? It's simple, really. Whenever you have differing data sets, you must confirm, validate, and provide evidence that one data set has inaccuracies. And before we go into our data analysis that will conclude in a different production number value, I want to applaud Ho Lake for their efforts and time, because the number that they produce is actually very close to the real number. Additionally, it appears that they spent the most part of a year arriving at their data, which is no less than dedication. So let's dive into the actual data. Before we do so, I want to disclose that the data we're about to share with you is data sourced from someone within Acura that was able to provide a primary source level of information. Additionally, this video was filmed on 2 different dates because we wanted to be careful in the wording to protect the source's identity. Acura is not known to release production data, and for that reason, it's important that we appreciate the source and protect their identity at all costs. With that said, let's dive into the data. On the screen, you will now see two different data sets. On the left hand side is the new data sourced from Acura, and on the right hand side is the data that we're all familiar with from Acura. So let's talk about the data differences. On the screen, you'll see highlighted portions in the left-hand side that indicate where there's a variance between our source of data and the historical source or Accurazine data. And we're going to basically set the record straight here. So the difference being is that the data that we have and we're able to obtain is from a primary source. The data that came from Accurazine, if you go into the history of it, which we shared with you a little bit in this video, you'll notice that there's a very iterative phase of changes that occur as the user, Holake, kind of refined their process and was able to provide what he believed was accurate information. And even in the wording that he uses, you can pick up on little subtleties about how he was inferring the data. Well, we're not inferring data any longer, we're actually sourcing the data. Okay, so let's talk about the source of data or the inaccuracies in the data from Accurazine versus what we were able to accomplish here. So let's take a look at what we did here. So the information on Taffeta White US black vehicle, we are showing you 16 vehicles with navigation as opposed to 15 vehicles. And why is that? Well, we were able to look at the VINs between the ivory and the black cars and the navigation cars, and determined through the information that Holake provided in his VIN range data that he actually attributed one of the VINs incorrectly. We were able to go back, pull out that VIN, and prove within the Acura system, the data source, that that car was actually a black navigation vehicle. So we are setting the record straight here. Taffeta White over black with navigation should be 16 vehicles produced, and that would be worldwide for that number. And we'll talk about the Canadian numbers in just a moment. But that's just one difference. So we also have to subtract one because we're moving it from ivory or parchment with navigation to black with navigation. So one gets subtracted and one gets added, but the total number of production cars doesn't change for Taffeta White. That's still 247 vehicles that we're aware of, or that we know for a fact. And there's other instances of that. So another good instance is right here with the San Marino red over black U.S. vehicles produced with navigation. We have 27. He has 25. And the reason why that is because his VIN range starts much later in the series. We know that there's two VINs that were not accounted for in his data set, VIN 50 and 51. These are real cars that were produced by Acura, and they are San Marino over black with navigation cars. So that's just two vehicles that were never known to exist if you go by this data from Acura. And we find a whole slew of other examples of this. And what we arrive at is a total different production number. So while Holake was very close in his production number of 3511 for total cars, it's slightly off. And while most people would say, well, that's not important to me, it is important because we want to talk about the exclusivity, the rareness, and we also want to be accurate in the data that we're trying to produce as well. So the total number of vehicles slightly increases with the information that we're presenting with you today. So before we get into the actual production worldwide, I want to talk about Canadian cars because that's something that we've never known about. Up until this point, we always assumed that the Canadian information was just not known and would probably likely never be known until we had something like this, a source of information. So let's talk about the total number of Canadian vehicles produced worldwide. So we have Asian Blue Pearl, Canadian CA here in our data set. 60 cars were produced without navigation, 0 produced with navigation. You'll see that as a trend. And so let's talk about that for a second. Cars with navigation for Canadian production will be zero throughout the data set. And that is not because that is missing data, that is because no Canadian cars came with navigation. And no Canadian cars with navigation, we could speculate as to why that is, but it was likely due to R&D, the amount of time, money it would take, resources to develop a navigation system that accounted for Canadian roads. And you have to think about this. This is the early 2000s. Not a lot of cars came stock with navigation. You can even see that here in the production numbers. If you had navigation, it was because you paid extra for it. Well, maybe not a lot of people were paying for that premium extra add-on. And so this is the end of the production for the CL. We're getting to the point where the CL's wrapping up. Navigation, not a big thing. And so this car for the Canadian market just didn't receive navigation. So continuing on with the Canadian production numbers, we have anthracite metallic, Canadian cars, 50 produced. And the other trend that you'll see is that they're all over black. The Canadian cars only came with black interior. So when we go to Nighthawk Black, you see that we have black and ivory. Canadian cars, we have 122 without navigation, no ivory cars. Let's talk about San Marino. San Marino, there were no Canadian cars produced with San Marino color. And going down here, so satin silver metallic, which is one of the more popular cars, we have 99 produced and no taffeta whites. So what we are able to conclude here is that for the Canadian market, you had only black interior, you had only without navigation, and it only came in Aegean blue pearl, anthracite metallic, Nighthawk black pearl, or satin silver metallic. No San Marino, no taffeta whites. So when we add up the total number of cars, we get 331 Canadian vehicles produced. That is for the first time we know that 331 Canadian vehicles were produced. This is new information that has been seen before. When we add that up with the new corrected data for the U.S. market, we have 3,514 U.S. marketed cars, and here's your split: 2690 for without navigation, 824 with navigation, plus our 331 from the Canadian market. You get 3,021 vehicles without navigation worldwide, and you get 824 with navigation to give you a total of 3,845 vehicles produced for the 2003 year with a 6-speed. So if you have a Canadian car, you have a very rare car. You have one of 331. If you have a navigation car, you're in a rare class as well with 824. And the most common, as we know, without navigation, 3,021 vehicles. So that is what I want to leave you with today. For the first time, we know the total number of production vehicles. I want to thank the source of the information, and I want to thank you all for continuing to watch these videos. Hopefully you learned something today. Also, hopefully we want to stop seeing the Acura Zine information being put out there onto the web. It's inaccurate. A lot of people use that as a source of information. And now that we know that it's inaccurate and we have real data to support the production numbers, let's stop spreading the incorrect data. Let's spread this information to our co-owners or people who are in this space so that they know what is the real production, and hopefully we can set the record straight throughout. So thanks for watching today. Hope you like this video. I won't ask you to click the like, but if you do, that would be much appreciated. Thanks.